I feel like this conversation happens once every few years, right? Like, sometimes you get yourselves a guy who shows off well in the Toronto Maple Leafs system, who happens to be a goalie, and he is so good and not too old to the point that a lot of Leafs fans can say, hey, this guy's the goalie of the future. He is our guy. And for the most part, there have been a few names that have rotated around that label, some of whom actually did play a pretty good amount of hockey and provided good results on top of that. You have the Freddie Andersons, whom I'm sure you could go out there and say what you want about Anderson, but I think a lot of Leafs fans can agree this guy was not bad when he was here. You have yourselves the conversations about Jack Campbell that took over the NHL news cycle for a good chunk while he was there, but ever since the Reimer-Bernier days, there have been many players whom Leafs fans have gotten excited for and have labeled as their goalie of the future. Today, we are talking about one of these guys who has entered the realm this year, and he showed off so extraordinarily well towards the end of 22-23 that you might have to go out there and say by default, this is the next best thing. Let's talk today about Joseph Woll, a 25-year-old from Missouri, USA, 6'3", 203 left-handed catching guy who was initially drafted by the Maple Leafs in the third round in 2016. So this guy has been in the system for a while. He was initially a guy from the NTDP, but it took a very long time of development for Woll to actually have himself, firstly, an NHL opportunity, and secondly, to actually look good in the process. As we had said, Woll was a third-round guy, but immediately after he got drafted, he started his career with the Boston College Eagles in the NCAA. There, he was a pretty good goalie, garnering a few awards. He made the All-Rookie team, was on the third All-Star team on future years, and had a few World Junior stints as well, one of which wherein he actually won the gold medal, so good on him for posting up those results. But after his tertiary season with the BC Eagles, he signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs and decided to go pro. Woll, for the next little while, was bouncing around with the Toronto Marlies. He was in a backup role over there, sort of sharing the load with the other Marlies guys. There are way too many to go out there and list. There were so many Marlies goalies the past few years. I guess D'Agostini is the guy that I think takes over that conversation, though. But eventually, in 22-23, this is where Woll got a very big boost in the eyes of Maple Leafs fans. Due to a few injuries and due to the lackluster performances of some other guys on the team, Woll ended up playing a few games towards the end of the season. He had 7 games played and a .216 goals against average, .932 save percentage as well. Just legitimately stellar numbers for a guy who is breaking out onto the scene for the first time. Sure, he had played a few NHL games the prior year, and he actually looked really good there too, but he was still mostly a Marlies guy who was developing and a prospect in the system nonetheless. Things took an even bigger turn for Woll, though, in the 2023 playoffs, where he had 4 games played. He actually did get a sample of Toronto hockey in the postseason, had a .915 save percentage in that, and a .243 goals against. Now, sure, he was playing in relief, but still, just getting that NHL playoff sample size is a very good indicator of what level he's able to play at, and for the most part, Woll looked good. This is why, if you go over to this article published on theleafsnation.com by Philippe Dimas from a few days ago, they rank Joseph Woll as the second best prospect in the Toronto Maple Leafs system. And it goes out there and asks the question here. Could Joseph Woll be the goalie of the future for the Maple Leafs? That's what fans wondered when he was initially drafted back in 2016, and those questions have grown louder over the past 2 years as the 25-year-old has put up an outstanding .924 save percentage across 11 games. It says here that Joseph Woll has all 3 attributes you want in a starting netminder: size, athleticism, and a fantastic nickname potential. Whether you're calling him the Brick Wall or Wally the Goalie, it's hard to watch a few games of Woll and not walk away impressed. The article then goes over the story. As we had talked about, Samsonov was injured in the postseason. Woll suited up. He actually won the only game the Maple Leafs won in the second round against Florida, so good on him for being the first Toronto Maple Leaf player to do that in almost 2 decades. Yeah, he's kind of historical now when you think about it, is he not? But for Woll heading into the next season, this is what a lot of Leafs fans are going to go out there and pay attention to. His butterfly style, and how he has spent the last few years working with strength coaches to build muscles that both maintain athletic mobility while also strengthening the core so that he can keep his body propped up at all times. While he previously had a tendency to get scrunched up while going into butterfly, which left massive openings to shoot high in the net, he has since grown better conditioned to remain squared up on shooters at all times. With a 6'3" frame, Woll needs to rely on his reflexes less often as he drops into the butterfly with proper form that makes the best use of his size. Now, I like that the nitty-gritty details as to what makes him actually effective are written out here, but the rest of the article kind of goes over just the situation with Toronto, how he's probably guaranteed a spot with the team later on, how if there's an injury or two, Woll will definitely be the guy who is brought in and actually given a role. All signs point to Woll being the only third goaltender the Toronto Maple Leafs have drafted and developed into a starter for the club in over 30 years, this Leafs Nation hockey article writes. If he makes the leap into that role at some point this year, it will breathe new life into the Maple Leafs' competitive window, offering a budget-friendly solution at the sport's most volatile position. From Potvin to Cujo and Belfour, Toronto has a long history of adoring goaltenders who show up and play their hearts out for the blue and white. Right now, Joseph Woll has an opportunity to be exactly the hero the Toronto Maple Leafs need and become Toronto's next great fan favorite goalie. Now, hold up there a second, Mr. Philippe Dimanche, who wrote this article. Great article, by the way. Link is in the description if you want to read more. There's a lot more in the piece that we didn't talk about in this video. But going out there and using Toronto's history and bringing Woll's name into the same conversation as guys like Potvin and Cujo, yeah, that's a bit much, but whatever. He's already a pretty good player, I guess you could say. But for Joseph Woll, this is sort of the growing sentiment that I feel for this guy that has especially arisen the past few weeks here. He was so good for the Toronto Maple Leafs towards the end of 22-23 that there is nothing really to go out there and look at and be concerned about. Sure, he's a 25-year-old goalie who has not played a full rookie season in the NHL. Sure, he's not guaranteed to being good, but there's nothing really in here that screams red flag. Even the contract situation. He's making just over league minimum on a RFA expiring deal that takes him till the end of 24-25. If he becomes the number one guy sometime in this season's worth of play, and he takes that over into next year's worth of play, then there really is a great opportunity here that the Toronto Maple Leafs could actually capitalize on. If you have a goalie who can play like a number one guy at under $1 million a year on a one-way contract, then you better use that gosh darn opportunity and make the most out of it. Trade away Samsonov, trade away whomever else, just free up some money and use that allocated dollar amount elsewhere. Sure, you could talk about the Murrays of the world, he's still on the LTIR. Samsonov is making 3-point-something mil. You got Martin Jones in here as well, who was brought in. By the way, I did see him a few weeks ago during the Troy Stetcher camp at Mineral Arenas. It was really interesting because Martin Jones was still racking his Seattle Kraken gear. I was like, oh yeah, right, that guy's a Maple Leaf. Right. But either way, there are a few goalies here. There are a few spots to earn for the Maple Leafs goaltending job. And for Joseph Woll, he's one of these guys that because he only really broke out onto the scene the past 2 years or so with the Maple Leafs, this guy has all the hype right now. And you could very much say it's justifiably there. So, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Joseph Woll, and do you feel like he could be the goalie of the future for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Do you think in a few years, when we talk about the likes of Belfour, Cujo, and all the other legends that have suited up for the Toronto Maple Leafs crease in the past, does Woll's name enter that conversation? Of course, that's a huge task, but for now, this is the hype level that I see a few Leafs fans bringing up, especially since it was in, an article like we just read. By the way, link in the description again if you want to go ahead and read that yourself. But thoughts in the comment section below about Joseph Woll and his future with the Toronto Maple Leafs as he take over the starting role sometime this season. Is it all just an injury away from him having his shot? Obviously, you don't want your guys to go out there and get injured, but circumstances are circumstances, and sometimes they're very likely to happen throughout a year. So, thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.